The trading post buzzed with activity as beings from across the galaxy moved between stalls. In the center stood an auction platform, where merchandise of all types changed hands for the right price. Today, among the goods to be sold were several sentient beings. Minna trembled slightly as guards led her onto the platform. Her violet skin caught the harsh lights overhead, making her appear to shimmer. The thin garment they had given her offered little protection against the cold air. She kept her eyes down, her slender antennae drooping with shame. Only yesterday, she had been the daughter of a respected Nillian trader. Today, she was property to be sold. Her father's gambling debts had finally caught up with him. And in Nillian society, a daughter deemed insufficiently resilient was an acceptable form of payment. "Remember your place," her father had told her as he handed her over. "You were born weak. At least now you can be useful." Minna fought back tears. Crying would only confirm what everyone believed about her, that she lacked the strength valued by her people. She straightened her back and raised her chin slightly. If this was to be her fate, she would face it with what dignity she could muster. The auctioneer, a bulky four-armed being, stepped forward. Next lot. Female Nillian, young adult, untrained but healthy. Nillians are known for their intelligence and adaptability. Starting bid at 500 credits. In the crowd, Captain Todd watched with growing discomfort. He had come to this trading post as part of his diplomatic mission, to observe and understand the customs of the various species in this sector. As a human representative, he was expected to remain neutral, especially regarding practices his own people had abandoned centuries ago. Yet something about the young Nillian's posture caught his attention. Despite her obvious fear, there was a quiet strength in how she held herself. He had studied Nillian culture and knew they valued physical prowess above all else, often discarding those they deemed weak. But looking at her, Ta saw no weakness, only dignity in the face of injustice. 500, called a voice from the crowd. 600, countered another. Tai watched as the bidding continued, his discomfort growing. The Human Alliance had strict policies against interfering with other cultures, even when those practices conflicted with human values. His superiors would not approve of any intervention. 800, called a Drevian merchant whom Tai recognized as a supplier of household servants to the wealthy. The auctioneer looked around. 800 going once. Something twisted in Ta's chest. The rational part of his mind urged caution, reminded him of protocols and non-interference directives. But another part, the part that had driven him to become a diplomat in the first place, the desire to build bridges between different peoples, couldn't stand by. 1,000, he called out, his voice clear in the suddenly quiet auction hall. Heads turned toward him. Humans rarely participated in these auctions. The auctioneer blinked all four of his eyes in surprise. 1,000 from the human representative. Do I hear 1,100? The Drevian merchant gave Ta a calculating look, then shook his head slightly and stepped back. 1,000 going once, going twice, sold to the human. Mina's head snapped up at the word human. Her eyes found Ta in the crowd, a tall figure with dark hair and skin the color of the sand on her homeworld. Humans were rare in this sector, known more through stories than direct contact. They were said to be unpredictable, emotional, but also fair-minded. Why would a human buy her? What would he expect from her? After paying the required credits, Tai approached the side of the platform where Mina was being led down. "Transaction complete," said the auction official, handing Tai a small digital pad. "Ownership transferred. The merchandise is yours." Tai took the pad without comment, his eyes meeting Mina's for the first time. Her eyes were large and deep purple, currently wide with fear. He tried to offer a reassuring smile, but she quickly looked down again. "Come with me," he said gently, not touching her. Mina followed silently as Tai led her through the crowded trading post. Other beings moved aside, many watching curiously. A human with a Nillian slave was an unusual sight. They reached a small transport vehicle parked at the edge of the trading post. Tai opened the passenger door. "Please, sit," he said. Mina obeyed, still keeping her eyes lowered. In her training before the auction, she had been told to always obey without question, to anticipate needs before they were expressed, to be invisible unless called upon. Ta climbed into the driver's seat and started the vehicle. Neither spoke as they traveled through the dusty roads away from the trading post, toward the small human embassy compound several kilometers away. When they reached the compound gates, the guards nodded respectfully to Tai, but gave curious glances at Mina. Inside, Tai led her to a small but comfortable room. "This is where you can stay," he said, gesturing around the space. It contained a bed, a chair, a small table, and a door that led to a washing facility. "Are you hungry? Thirsty?" Mina finally looked up, confusion clear on her face. These were not the quarters of a servant. "Where would you like me to serve, master?" she asked quietly. Tai winced at the word master. "My name is Tai," he said, "and you're not going to serve anyone. I didn't buy you to be a servant." Her antennae twitched in confusion. "Then, why? What purpose do you want me for?" "No purpose," Ta said simply. "I bought your contract to free you." Mina stared at him, uncomprehending. In her world, everything and everyone had a purpose, a use. The concept of being purchased simply to be freed made no sense. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You will," Tay replied gently. "But first, rest. Tomorrow we can talk more about what happens next. The choice will be yours." Choice, another concept foreign to Mina. She watched as Tai moved toward the door. "My name is Mina," she said suddenly, wanting him to know at least that much about her. Tay turned back with a small smile. "Rest well, Mina. You're safe now." As the door closed behind him, Mina sat on the edge of the bed, her mind racing. Humans were indeed as strange as the story said. But perhaps, just perhaps, her father had been wrong about one thing. Maybe her weakness would not define her fate after all. Mina woke to sunlight filtering through unfamiliar curtains. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The bed beneath her was soft, the room warm and clean. Then memory returned, the auction, the human called Tai, his strange words about freedom. She sat up slowly, examining the room in daylight. A set of clothes lay folded on the chair, simple garments in blue fabric. They looked nothing like a servant's uniform. Cautiously, she touched them. The material felt soft against her violet skin. A gentle knock sounded at the door. "Mina, are you awake?" Tay's voice came through clearly. "Yes," she answered, quickly wrapping the blanket around herself. "I've brought breakfast. May I come in?" The request surprised her. A master asking permission. "Yes," she repeated, uncertain. Tai entered, carrying a tray with various foods. His smile seemed genuine as he set it on the small table. "I wasn't sure what Nilians eat, so I brought options." Mina stared at the assortment. On her world, servants ate simple gruel. Here was fruit, bread, something that smelled sweet and warm. "Thank you," she said, the words feeling strange. Servants did not thank masters. Ta pulled up the chair. "After you eat, perhaps we could talk about what happens next." Mina approached the table cautiously and sat across from him. She selected a piece of fruit, watching him for approval before taking a bite. "You don't need my permission," Ta said gently. "That's what I meant yesterday. I purchased your contract only to free you." Mina set down the fruit. "I don't understand this concept. What does free mean?" Ta considered her question seriously. "It means you make your own choices, where to go, what to do, how to live. No one owns you or commands you." Mina's antennae twitched in confusion. "But everyone serves someone. That is the way of all worlds." "Not all worlds," He replied. "On Earth, my homeworld, we believe all sentient beings have the right to self-determination." Mina took another bite of fruit to hide her discomfort. Self-determination was not a concept in Nilian culture. From birth, her people were assigned roles based on their physical attributes. Her slender build and quiet nature had marked her as subordinate. "What would I do if I were free?" she asked finally. "Whatever you wish," Ta said. "You could stay here while you decide. The human embassy offers asylum to those seeking refuge." Asylum. The translator in her mind struggled with the concept. "Protection," Tai explained. "No one can force you to return to your father or to servitude." Mina's eyes widened. "My father would not approve. He would say I dishonor our family by refusing my proper place." "With respect," Ta said carefully, "I don't believe selling one's child honors any family." His words shocked her. No one had ever questioned her father's right to dispose of her as he saw fit. "You don't understand our ways," she said, but without conviction. "Perhaps not fully," Tay acknowledged. "But I understand enough to know you deserve better." After breakfast, Ta showed Mina around the small embassy compound. The building was modest compared to the grand structures of her homeworld, but its simplicity felt welcoming. Other humans nodded politely as they passed. None treated her as a servant. In a garden area, they sat on a bench surrounded by plants from various worlds. Mina noticed a small purple flower that looked similar to those that grew near her childhood home. "That one is from Nilia," Ta said, following her gaze. "We try to include elements from all allied worlds to make visitors feel welcome." "It's beautiful," she said softly. "I never had time to notice flowers at home. Always too many chores." Tai observed her thoughtfully. "What did you do before the auction?" Mina's antennae drooped slightly. "I managed my father's household. Cooking, cleaning, accounting. My father traded luxury goods across the sector." "You kept his accounts?" Tai asked, surprise evident in his voice. "Yes. Numbers came easily to me, though such mental work is considered unsuitable for females in our culture." "That's a valuable skill," Ta said. "The embassy always needs help with coordinating trade information between worlds." Mina looked at him sharply. "Are you offering me work?" "If you're interested." "Paid work," he clarified. "Not servitude." "Paid." The concept seemed almost offensive, like a male. Ta smiled gently. "Like any valuable worker, regardless of gender." Before Mina could respond, another human approached them. She was older than Tai, with gray in her dark hair and a serious expression. "Captain Tai," she said formally. "A word, please." Ta nodded. "Mina, this is Director G, head of our diplomatic mission." "Director, this is Mina." The woman gave Mina a measuring look. "Welcome to the embassy." To Tai, she added, "My office immediately." As Ta followed Director Zhe, another human approached, a younger woman with a friendly smile. "Hello," she said. "I'm Sue. Tai asked me to show you around while he's busy. Would you like to see the library?" "Library," Mina repeated. Sue's smile widened. "Books, data files, information from across the galaxy. It's my favorite place here. Knowledge freely available." Another strange human concept. On Nilia, information was carefully controlled, especially for females. Meanwhile, in Director Ju's office, Ta faced his superior's disapproval. "What were you thinking?" Director G demanded. "Purchasing a sentient being at auction. The diplomatic implications alone." "I couldn't leave her there," Tai interrupted. "You know what happens to those sold at these auctions." Director G sighed. "Your compassion does you credit, but this complicates our mission. The Nilian government considers your action interference in their cultural practices." "Their cultural practices include selling people," Ta said firmly. "I'm not defending it," Director G replied. "But we're here to build relations, not judge. The Nilian ambassador has already demanded the girl's return. Her father claims the sale was a misunderstanding." Tay's jaw tightened. "It wasn't. I witnessed the exchange, and her name is Mina." In the library, Mina ran her fingers along the spines of actual physical books, a luxury on her resource-poor world. Sue showed her how to access information terminals that connected to databases throughout human space. "You can read whatever interests you," Sue explained. Mina hesitated. On my world, females are not encouraged to study beyond household management. Sue looked genuinely puzzled. That seems wasteful. How do you contribute your unique perspectives? The question stirred something in Mina, a longing she had suppressed for years. What would it be like to study freely, to have her thoughts valued? As she contemplated this, Ty returned, his expression troubled. Is everything all right? Mina asked. There's a complication, he said. Your father has contacted the embassy. He wants you returned to him. Fear clutched at Mina's heart. Will you send me back? Tay's eyes met hers steadily. Not unless you want to go. The choice is yours, Mina. That's what freedom means. Choice. Such a small word for such an overwhelming concept. For the first time in her life, Mina's future rested in her own hands. The embassy's meeting room felt too small, with 6 million officials crowded inside. Their tall, violet forms towered over the humans present. Mina sat beside Ty, trying not to tremble as she faced her father across the polished table. Trader Rock had always been an imposing figure in Mina's life. His broad shoulders and deep purple skin marked him as a prime specimen by Nillian standards. Now his antennae were stiff with anger as he glared at his daughter. This situation is simple, Rock announced. The human misunderstood our cultural practice. I was not permanently selling my daughter, but engaging in a traditional period of service training. I request her immediate return. Director G, seated at the head of the table, maintained a neutral expression. Captain Ta participated in a legal auction. He has documentation of purchase and transfer of ownership. Documentation that should be invalidated, said the Nillian ambassador, a stern female named Vela. Human interference in our customs threatens our trading relationship. Mina stared at her hands in her lap. For 3 days, she had experienced life in the human embassy. Eaten regular meals, slept in a comfortable bed, even begun learning to use their information systems. The thought of returning to her father's house made her feel hollow inside. Perhaps we should hear from Mina herself, Ta suggested quietly. All eyes turned to her. On Nilia, females spoke in official meetings only when directly ordered to do so. She felt her father's glare without looking up. Mina, Director G said gently, do you wish to return with your father? Mina gathered her courage. No, she whispered. Her father slammed his hand on the table. This is outrageous. She has no right to choose. She belongs to her family until properly transferred through marriage or service contract. Under human diplomatic law, Ta said firmly, any sentient being who requests asylum must have their case heard. Mina has requested asylum. She is incapable of making such decisions, Ambassador Vela stated. Females of her classification lack the mental capacity for self-determination. Something shifted inside Mina. All her life, she had been told she was weak, insufficient, incapable. She had managed her father's household accounts, maintained his trading records, even negotiated with suppliers when he was too drunk to do so himself, all while being told she was worthless. She raised her head and spoke, her voice stronger than she expected. Article 27 of the Nillian Trade Code states that any transfer of property, once payment is verified and ownership documented, is considered final and binding. The room fell silent. Ambassador Vela's antennae twitched in surprise. The auction was conducted according to our laws. Mina continued, by our own legal code, I now belong to Captain Tai, who has chosen to grant me freedom. I am simply following the legal path laid out by our traditions. Her father's face darkened with rage. How dare you cite law to me, girl? You were barely fit to clean my dwelling, let alone understand our codes. I maintained your trading records for 6 cycles, Mina replied evenly. I know our laws well. Ambassador Vela studied Mina with new interest. You managed trade records. At what complexity level? Full interplanetary commerce, including currency conversions and tariff calculations, Mina answered. My father preferred not to employ an accountant. The ambassador exchanged glances with the other Nillian officials. Such work typically required specialized training reserved for males of high status. This changes nothing, Rock insisted. She is still my daughter. Who you sold, Ta pointed out. Legally and willingly. Director G raised her hand for silence. We have a complex situation. I propose we adjourn to consider all aspects before proceeding. As the meeting broke up, Minna felt her father's eyes following her. Outside in the corridor, Tay touched her arm gently. That was impressive, he said. You never mentioned you knew Nilian trade law. Mina's antennae drooped slightly. Females aren't supposed to. I learned while organizing my father's documents. Knowledge isn't gender-specific among humans, Ta said. Your understanding of Nilian law could be valuable to our diplomatic mission. Before Mina could respond, a junior diplomat hurried toward them. Captain Ta, Director G needs you immediately. We've received a formal complaint from the Nilian Central Authority. Tay's expression grew serious. Stay within the embassy grounds, he told Mina. I'm concerned your father might attempt to remove you by force. After Tai left, Minna wandered to the embassy garden. The purple flowers from her homeworld seemed to watch her as she sat beside them. What would happen now? She had spoken against her father publicly, an unforgivable offense in Nilian culture. There you are. Mina turned to find Sue approaching with a datapad. I heard what happened in the meeting, Sue said, sitting beside her. Everyone's talking about how you cited Nilian trade law. That was brave. Or foolish, Minna replied. I've made my father even angrier. Sue shrugged. Sometimes standing up for yourself makes others uncomfortable. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. She handed Minna the datapad. I thought you might want to see this. It's the full text of the asylum provisions in the Interspecies Diplomatic Accord. Your case actually fits several of the qualifying conditions. Minna took the pad, scanning the information. Legal terms from different worlds flowed across the screen, but the underlying principle was clear: protection for those facing persecution or rights violations. Thank you, she said softly. Later that evening, Ta found Minna in the embassy library. She was surrounded by datapads and actual paper documents, making notes on a small screen. What are you working on? He asked. Minna looked up, her expression determined. Preparing my case. If I must defend my right to freedom, I will do so properly. Tai sat across from her. The situation has escalated. The Nilian government claims I've committed cultural interference by suggesting you have rights they don't recognize. They're threatening to reduce their trade with human worlds. My father's influence, Minna said. He supplies luxury goods to many high-ranking officials. Director Jai is under pressure to return you as a gesture of goodwill. Fear flickered across Minna's face, but she straightened her shoulders. And what do you think should happen? I think you should have the chance to choose your own path, Ta said simply. But I need to be honest. Protecting that choice may come at a diplomatic cost. Minna considered this. All her life, she had been taught that individual needs must yield to the greater good. Now humans were potentially risking important relationships to defend her rights. Perhaps there's another solution, she said slowly, one that satisfies both sides. What do you mean? Minna turned her datapad to show Todd what she'd been studying, not just asylum provisions, but trade agreements between humans and Nilians. My father's business depends on access to human markets. The Nilian economy needs this trade relationship more than humans need Nilian luxury goods. If I can demonstrate my value as a cultural liaison who understands both worlds, perhaps I can create a new position for myself, one that serves both societies. Tai studied her with growing respect. You're suggesting becoming a diplomatic asset rather than a diplomatic problem. Exactly, Minna said, her antennae lifting with new confidence. Tomorrow, I would like to address the full diplomatic committee, not as a refugee seeking protection, but as someone offering a solution. For the first time since the auction, Ta smiled broadly. Director G will be interested to hear this proposal. As night fell over the embassy, Minna stood at her window looking at the stars. Somewhere up there was the Nilian homeworld, where females like her were still bound by ancient restrictions. Perhaps her small stand for freedom could eventually lead to bigger changes. Freedom, she was learning, wasn't just about making choices for oneself. Sometimes it meant creating new possibilities for others as well. The transport hummed softly as it descended through Earth's atmosphere. Minna pressed her face to the viewing port, watching clouds part to reveal vast oceans and green continents below. After 3 weeks of space travel from the distant outpost, they had finally arrived at Ta's homeworld. "It's so blue," she whispered, her violet fingers touching the cold surface of the window. Beside her, Ta smiled at her wonder. 70% water. Very different from Nilia. The diplomatic solution Minna had proposed had worked better than anyone expected. Instead of forcing her return or creating a permanent rift with the Nilians, Director Jai had suggested a cultural exchange program. Minna would travel to Earth as a cultural representative, learning about humans while sharing knowledge about her own people. Her father had opposed the plan initially, but when several high-ranking Nilian trade officials expressed interest in better understanding their human trading partners, he had been outvoted. Ambassador Vela herself had supported the program, perhaps recognizing the value of Minna's unusual perspective. The transport landed smoothly at a facility outside a city called Seoul. As the door opened, Earth's atmosphere rushed in, heavier than Minna was used to, rich with unfamiliar scents. "It feels dense," she said, taking careful breaths. "The gravity is stronger too," Ta warned. "Take it slow at first." Minna took her first steps on Earth carefully. Her legs felt heavy, her movements sluggish compared to Nilia's lighter gravity. Still, she walked proudly past the human officials who had come to greet them. She wore a specially designed environmental suit that helped her adapt to Earth conditions while displaying her natural violet coloration. "Welcome to Earth, Representative Minna," said an older human female who introduced herself as Minister Kim. "We're honored to have our first official Nilian cultural attaché." The title still felt strange to Minna. On her world, she had been considered barely worthy of notice. Here, she was addressed with respect, expected to share opinions, make decisions. Their first week on Earth passed in a blur of meetings and introductions. Minna stayed in a small apartment adjacent to Ta's in a diplomatic residence complex. Each morning, she practiced walking in Earth's gravity. Each evening, she recorded observations about human culture for her reports back to Nilia. "They keep asking what I think," she told Ta one evening as they shared a meal in his apartment. She had developed a fondness for Earth fruits, especially something called strawberries. "Is that uncomfortable?" Ta asked, passing her the bowl of red berries. "Not uncomfortable, just new." On Nilia, no one cared what females thought about anything important. Ta considered this as he ate. "What do you think of Earth so far?" Honestly. Minna's antennae twitched thoughtfully. "It's chaotic. Humans contradict themselves constantly. You value freedom but have countless rules. You claim all are equal yet maintain hierarchies. You're fascinating." Ta laughed. "A fair assessment. What about the people?" "Kind," Minna said immediately. "Even when confused by me, humans try to understand rather than dismiss. It's healing." Something warm flickered in Ta's eyes, but he looked away quickly. As weeks passed, Minna's responsibilities grew. She began attending cultural events, explaining Nilian customs to curious humans. Many were shocked by the rigid gender roles of her society. "You mean females can't own property?" asked a student during a university lecture. "Or choose their own mates?" questioned another. "Or serve in government?" added a third. Minna explained her world's traditions without judgment, though each question illuminated how differently she now viewed her own culture. Distance had given her perspective. One afternoon, Tai took her to a museum displaying art from across the galaxy. Minna moved slowly through the exhibition, stopping before a painting by a human artist. It showed a landscape under two suns, one large and orange, one small and blue, casting dual shadows across purple mountains. "This reminds me of the Western Highlands on Nilia," she said softly. "Though the artist has never been there, they've captured something essential about my world." "Art does that," Ta said. "Bridges gaps between experiences. On Nilia, art is considered a male pursuit." Minna told him. "Females may appreciate it, but not create it." Tai studied her face. "Would you like to try creating art? There's a workshop here where visitors can experiment with different media." Minna hesitated. "I wouldn't know how to begin." "That's the point of experimenting," Tai encouraged. "No right or wrong way." In the workshop, Minna stared at the blank canvas before her. Around the room, beings from various worlds applied colors, shaped clay, or manipulated light projections. No one told them what to create or how. The freedom was terrifying and exhilarating. She picked up a brush, dipped it in purple paint, and made her first mark. It felt forbidden, thrilling. She added blue, then green, working instinctively. The image that emerged wasn't technically skilled, but expressed something she couldn't have put into words, the feeling of breaking free from invisible chains. When she finally stepped back, she saw Ta watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What do you think?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "I think it's beautiful," he said simply. "Because it's yours." Something shifted between them that day. A new awareness that made Minna both nervous and excited. They began spending more time together outside official functions. Ta showed her Earth's natural wonders, forests, mountains, oceans. Minna shared stories of Nilia that she had never told anyone, memories of beauty amid restriction. One evening, they walked along a beach as Earth's single moon rose over the water. The sight was less spectacular than Nilia's 3 moons, but somehow more intimate. "I received a message from Ambassador Vela today," Minna said, watching small waves wash over her feet. "The cultural exchange reports I've been sending have created quite a stir on Nilia. Some younger females are questioning traditional roles." "Is that good or bad?" Tai asked. "Change is never simple," Minna replied. "But necessary, I think." They walked in comfortable silence until Minna stopped suddenly. "Ta, why did you really buy my contract that day?" "The truth." Ta looked out at the dark water. "I told myself it was about principles, that no sentient being should be property. But honestly, something about you called to me. Your dignity, your quiet strength. I wanted to know who you would become if given the chance to choose your own path." Minna moved closer to him, their arms almost touching. "And now I'm grateful every day that I followed that impulse," Ta said softly. "Watching you discover yourself has been the greatest privilege of my life." Under Earth's moon, so far from the world that had defined and then discarded her, Minna felt something bloom in her chest, not gratitude or friendship, but something deeper, more complex. She had learned enough about human customs now to recognize what it might be. She reached out tentatively and took Ta's hand in hers. His fingers closed around her violet ones without hesitation. "I'm still discovering," she said, "but I'm beginning to understand what freedom really means." The Nilian council chamber gleamed with polished stone as Minna stood before the assembled officials. 1 year had passed since she first left this planet as property to be sold. Now she returned as Earth's official envoy to Nilia, the first female ever to hold such a position. Tai sat among the diplomatic observers, his face carefully neutral though his eyes held pride as he watched her. Their journey together had transformed them both. "Honored Council," Minna began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "I bring greetings from Earth and a proposal for expanded cooperation between our worlds." The 7 council members, all male, all with the deep purple skin that marked prime Nilian genetics, regarded her with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed disdain. At the end of the row sat her father, recently appointed to the council through his trading connections. His antennae twitched with displeasure at the sight of his daughter addressing the chamber as an equal. "We recognize Earth's representative," said Chief Counselor Drav, his tone formal. "Though we note the unusual choice of envoy." Minna had expected this subtle challenge. Sometimes unusual perspectives yield unexpected benefits, she replied smoothly. My unique position between our cultures has revealed opportunities previous representatives might have missed. She activated the holographic display before the council. Charts appeared showing trade volumes between Nilita and Earth over the past decade. Current exchange focuses primarily on luxury goods moving from Nilia to Earth, with technology flowing the opposite direction. But this model limits potential growth. She gestured, and the display changed to show new projections. By expanding into cultural and educational exchanges, we could triple overall trade value within 5 years. The counselors leaned forward, their interest piqued by the numbers. Even her father couldn't hide his surprise at the projections. What specific changes do you propose? Asked Counselor Vor, the youngest member. A new academy for interspecies studies, jointly funded and operated, exchange programs for students and specialists, and Minna paused, knowing her next proposal was most controversial. Equal participation, regardless of gender or genetic classification. Her father rose halfway from his seat. This is outrageous. She seeks to undermine our traditional values. I seek to enhance them, Minna countered. Nilia faces labor shortages in critical sectors, while half our population remains restricted from contributing fully. Earth has prospered through inclusivity. Prosperity isn't everything, her father growled. Order and tradition matter. Indeed they do, agreed Minna, which is why my proposal preserves Nilian cultural identity while creating new opportunities. The results on Earth speak for themselves. Chief Counselor Drav studied her thoughtfully. You've changed greatly, daughter of rock. Once deemed insufficient for even basic service, now you stand before the highest council speaking of interplanetary economics. I haven't changed, honored counselor, Minna replied. I simply found an environment that allowed me to use abilities I always possessed. The council chambers emptied after 3 hours of detailed discussion. Minna's proposal would be considered over the coming days, though she felt cautiously optimistic about its reception. Most counselors seemed impressed by the potential economic benefits, if nothing else. Outside in the courtyard, surrounded by Nilia's distinctive red-leaf trees, Ta joined her. You were magnificent, he said quietly. Even your father seemed speechless at times. Minna allowed herself a small smile. He never believed I could do basic mathematics, let alone create multi-year economic projections. Will you see him while we're here? Tai asked. Minna gazed up at the 3 moons just beginning to rise in the late afternoon sky. I should, not for his sake, but for mine. Her father's residence stood on the outskirts of the capital, a grand structure befitting his status. Minna approached alone, having asked Ta to wait at their diplomatic quarters. Some conversations needed to happen without witnesses. Rock answered her signal himself rather than sending a servant. He looked older than she remembered, the purple of his skin slightly dulled. So you've come, he said, neither welcoming nor rejecting her. Yes, father. He stood aside, allowing her to enter the home where she had spent 20 years in servitude. Little had changed. The same austere furnishings, the same cool lighting that Nilians preferred. Your performance before the council was competent, Rock said finally, the closest thing to praise he had ever offered her. Thank you, Minna replied simply. They stood in uncomfortable silence until Rock spoke again. Why have you come here? To gloat over your new position. Minna shook her head. To understand. Why did you sell me that day? The truth, father. Rock's antennae drooped slightly. The truth. I needed the money, yes, but also, I believed you would be better served elsewhere. You never fit here, never accepted your place. I thought perhaps in service to another household, you would find contentment. You sold me for my own good. Minna asked incredulously. I sold you because I failed as a father, Rock admitted, surprising her. Failed to make you understand our ways. Failed to protect you from ideas above your station. Minna studied the male who had shaped her early life through criticism and constraint. You didn't fail, father. You simply couldn't see who I really was. When she returned to their quarters, Tai was waiting on the balcony that overlooked the capital city. Night had fallen, and all three moons illuminated the landscape with their combined light. "How was it?" he asked as she joined him. "Difficult. Necessary." Minna leaned against the railing. He still believes females should know their place, but at least he acknowledged I might have one beyond servitude. Tai covered her hand with his. "Progress comes slowly sometimes." They stood in companionable silence, watching the moonlight play across the city below. After a while, Tai reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I've been carrying this since we left Earth," he said, his voice suddenly nervous, waiting for the right moment. He opened the box to reveal a ring crafted from an iridescent material that shifted colors like Mina's skin in different lights. "On Earth, we have a tradition," Tai explained. "When two people wish to form a permanent bond, they exchange rings as symbols of their commitment." Mina's antennae quivered with emotion. "We have a similar custom on Nilia, though traditionally only males may initiate it." "I'm not asking according to Nilian custom, or even strictly Earth custom," Ta said softly. "I'm asking in our way, the path we've created together. Mina, would you join your life with mine, not as my possession, but as my equal partner?" Mina looked from the ring to Ta's face, seeing there all the respect, admiration, and love that had grown between them over the past year. "In the auction house, you bought my freedom," she said. "Now I give you my heart freely." Under the three moons of her birth world, Minna accepted the ring that symbolized not ownership but partnership. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The Council's decision, ongoing resistance to change, the complex path of bridging two vastly different cultures. But tonight belonged to them alone. Later, as they sat together watching the moons traverse the night sky, Minna reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From property to diplomat, from servant to partner, each step had seemed impossible before she took it. "What are you thinking?" Tai asked, his arm warm around her shoulders. "That sometimes," Minna replied. "Freedom isn't just about choosing your own path. Sometimes it's about creating a new path where none existed before." Ta smiled. "And sometimes it's about finding someone to walk that path with you." As the largest moon reached its zenith, bathing the city in pale light, Minna understood at last what her life had been preparing her for. Not to serve, not to obey, but to build bridges between worlds that thought they could never understand each other. And beside her sat the proof that such understanding was possible, the human who had once been her owner for a single day and would soon be her husband for a lifetime.